Hi and welcome to Orbit. This is the new iPad Pro OLED M4 13-inch 2024 edition. Now that I say it out loud, it doesn't quite sound right, but I had this thing everywhere with me. I tested the basic tablet stuff, but also more extensive workloads, pro stuff. And I have many things to say about this thing. The new iPad Pro looks like an iPad and feels like an iPad, only much thinner and lighter than before. It weighs around 1 chocolate bar less and is now 5.1 millimeters instead of 6. This makes it officially the thinnest Apple product ever, apart from the cleaning cloth and the Apple Card. Seriously though, it feels so great. You really wonder how they can fit in battery, speakers, processor, memory, camera and a display in such a thin aluminum case. And the 4 speakers sound seriously impressive. Really full and clear with an amazing amount of bass, even better than the MacBook Air. The only thing that bothers me about the design is the camera. It seems unnecessarily large for the fact that it's only one. And all of the sensors and the microphone, it looks kind of untypical for Apple. The weight is 580 grams, which is very light for a tablet of this size and roughly equivalent to 3 smartphones. After a short time I got used to the new design and realized somewhat sadly that you rarely feel the thin case because you usually have it inside of a cover or the keyboard case. And the new color is black. It gets dirty really quickly and it's hard to clean it. I don't understand why Apple isn't using the same repellent coating as on the MacBook Pro. Therefore, I would recommend silver to you. The iPad Pro is available in 2 sizes, 11.1 inch and 12.9 inch, but for the sake of simplicity they are now calling them 11 and 13 inch. And when you look at the display for the first time, you might think that everything is the same. Same size, same sharpness, same display bezels, same color, same 4:3 aspect ratio, same 120 Hz smooth refresh rate. But if you take a closer look, you quickly notice that the contrast and the black levels are now lower. This is particularly noticeable on the 11-inch model. It looks way more vivid and the brightness is also much higher. It is now an OLED display, or actually 2 OLED displays that are perfectly aligned on top of each other. And that's why the brightness is not 500 nits like on most other OLED tablets, but twice as much, 1000 nits. And that's for the entire screen size and for hours if necessary. And for HDR content, even 1600 nits peak are possible. And you can see how much of a difference this can make in bright sunlight. The M2 Pro is on in this frame, I swear. It's just a beautiful display. Maybe even the most beautiful display I know. I wish the MacBooks and the Apple monitors had the same display. And you can also use the iPad as a second monitor with your Mac, which I really appreciated in my hotel room when I was traveling. This is the thinnest, best mobile monitor and it even has a built-in battery. I can only criticize 2 things. First, there is no always on display, even though it's an OLED, so it would work perfectly fine. And second, now there is a matte option with nano texture coating and I just love that kind of glass. It's my absolute favorite. I bought it for my Pro Display XDR and it costed $1,000 extra, so I do like it. But you need to buy the 1 terabyte version and pay 130 euros extra, so you pay a total of 900 euros more to have the matte glass. So probably no one will buy it. And if they do, it is more sensitive than the regular glass. It does not feel drastically different to regular glass. And you have slightly less sharpness and a slight grain on white surfaces. So if you want matte glass, maybe you should just buy a matte protective film. This monkey is, if you believe it or not, the best thing I can draw. It was enough to be accepted at an art university, so it's not too bad, I guess, but there are many people out there with a little bit more talent than I. It now recognizes the rotation of the pencil as well as the pressure. You can still double tap to switch between 2 tools and you can now also pinch to open up a menu or switch between layers. You can set that individually in each app and each time you get a pleasant vibration feedback. It feels like you're really squeezing the pen. Plus the almost non-existent latency, this is the most professional pen in the world. Well, that sounds kind of stupid. And if you lose it, and you can lose it quite easily because the iPad is thin, this thing does not hold very well, there is Apple Find My built in. It's not the same Apple Find My like in the AirTags, where you can find it precision-wise very accurate, but better than nothing, I guess. The old Apple Pencil is no longer compatible because of the new thin design and the fact that the selfie camera and Face ID are now both on the side. The iPad Pro contains the brand new M4 processor. According to Apple, it's 50% more powerful in the CPU and even 400% more powerful in the GPU than the M2. I even measured 53% for the CPU. That's the highest single core score of all computers in general. And in multi-core, we've reached a point where this thing is as strong as an M2 Max, which is just insane. It's only 5mm and has no cooling inside. That's insane. Well, not no cooling, but no fan. And for the GPU, I did not measure 400% improvement, but actually 30% in regular graphic tests and up to 60% in ray tracing tasks. But with GPU, it can depend very much on the app you're using. Nonetheless, it is faster than before, about 3 times stronger than a Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra, which is just insane. And also the NPU in here is stronger, which is a good thing nowadays, but it will be even more important in the future. I don't need to tell you that the iPad Pro runs absolutely smooth in everyday use. That has been the case with the old ones as well. The question is rather whether you can utilize all this power, so that's exactly what I tried. The Hasselblad X2D takes 100 megapixel 16-bit RAW photos, and even my Mac Studio sweats. On the iPad Pro I can zoom around and adjust the colors very smoothly, no problem at all. I made a thumbnail for this video with Photomator and Photoshop on the iPad and was surprised how well it worked. Generative fill with Adobe Firefly, retouching the imperfections and only adding a mask to the display led to judder. The M4 also became noticeably warm, not unpleasant or borderline, and funnily enough only where the Apple logo is, because the heatsink of the M4 is behind it. Thanks to ray tracing, there are more complex games now developed for the iPhone, like Resident Evil or Death Stranding, and it's almost like they actually designed them for the iPad because they can run here too, and even better. It's like a 5mm thin PlayStation with a display. Video editing is the bulk of my work, so I wanted to edit this video on the iPad, but unfortunately that was not possible. It still doesn't support custom LUTs or fonts. I can stabilize clips and color grading is pretty basic. But the biggest problem was that I'm filming with the Red Cinema camera and the files are not compatible. This is a very specific situation and not many will be confronted with it. Normal video files from a camera or smartphone will run smoothly. So if you need to edit a video, you can do that with the iPad, but you have to be prepared for the fact that some functions may be missing that are available on the Mac. And you should always keep an eye on the storage, because the smallest model has 256 gigabytes. I think 512 gigabytes would be more suitable for the money. In addition, the RAM only doubles from 8 to 16 gigabytes if you buy the 1 terabyte version. Also, then you have 1 CPU core more. There's no denying that the iPad still lacks some features that the Mac has, but there are also things the iPad has that the Mac doesn't. You can draw directly with the Apple Pencil in Photoshop or Final Cut. There is an optional 5G version with eSIM, so you don't need to be in Wi-Fi. All of the streaming providers do have an app, so you can download movies. You can't do that on the Mac. The camera on the iPad is very basic, but it does a good job of scanning documents. In my opinion, the iPad is still more for consuming rather than creating content than the Mac, but every year the gap gets a little bit smaller and Worldwide Developer Conference is coming up soon. We're expecting a major update for iPadOS with a lot of artificial intelligence, so if you're interested, I will do a long-term review. As of now, iPadOS is a slightly more capable iOS, and compared to Android, it's much more productive and perfectly adapted to the large display. There are lots of apps, there are beautiful apps, and there are extensive apps. I'm slowly learning to love the Stage Manager, which I found strange at first. You can switch between many windows really easy, just like on the Mac. And even though the support for external displays is still a bit strange, it's also getting better. I don't want to give Apple the advantage, but I also don't want to blame iPadOS for everything that's bad about this product. iPadOS is the limiting factor, yes, but some people think that macOS is just too complicated, and that's why they choose an iPad, and I can feel that. In addition to the iPad Pro, there is a new Magic Keyboard. It is better than the old one in every respect. Aluminium on the inside, looks and feels high quality, more stable keys that click nicely, an extra row for function keys, and the trackpad is now glass and you can click everywhere. Also, it does support faster charging with USB-C, a maximum of 60 watt instead of 22. It is the best keyboard case I know because it is so much better. The things that haven't been improved are now way more noticeable. The outside is still made of that silicone rubber stuff and I don't like it. Also, it roughly doubles the thickness and the weight of the iPad and makes it heavier than a MacBook Air. And because the iPad is so thin, you probably worry about the battery life. But you don't need to worry. I got 6 to 7 hours of display use. If you watch a lot of movies and are mainly indoors, you can get a little bit longer than that. The OLED display saves on energy every time black is displayed. But if you sit in bright light and you're editing videos, the runtime can be less than half. At some point I stopped using my iPad because it was always empty when I needed it. That's why I switched to the Google Pixel tablet, because it is always charged in my apartment and it also controls my smart home. I was hoping that Apple could come up with something like this, a dock where the iPad can stand and charge, but unfortunately it does not exist yet. Conclusion: the iPad Pro feels a little bit like a pickup truck. There are these commercials where you're driving through the nature and towing big things, but in reality the only huge obstacle you ever challenge with your pickup truck is like a curb at the supermarket. With the iPad Pro it's kind of the same. At the end you will use it for YouTube and Netflix probably. I can't do more than with my old iPad Pro, but in theory I can. And now the only thing left is hope that Apple and developers will work with that new performance. At 1,200 euro for the 11-inch and 1,550 euros for the 13-inch, the prices are about the same with the competition and the iPhones. But if you ramp up the storage and buy an Apple Pencil or a Magic Keyboard, you can quickly get to 2,000 to 3,000 euros, which is, well, way more expensive than a MacBook Air, which is an non-pro product and can do more pro tests than this thing. But still, I do love the design, I love the display, the speakers, the performance, the Apple Pencil, and I do want this thing as my main computer, but sadly, right now, it can't be.